All right, we're live now with Pastor Denise Childers, who is our pastor for senior adult ministries at Grace United Methodist Church. Thanks, Pastor Denise, for making some time for us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you for asking me. I am not in my most comfortable element, so I appreciate your guidance and also the opportunity to highlight the need for senior adults to be an important part of this time when we're social distancing on purpose and trying to be safe, but also the isolation that tends to come with that. So thanks.
Yeah. So my first question is, how are you holding up?
Well, I think Clayton and I are holding up quite well. We've been very cautiously social distancing, doing a lot of walking, and I started doing Tai Chi online this week, so that's been exciting. Been wanting to do that for a while. We have taken turns to go to the grocery store at the, bewitching hour of 7 a.m. or 6 a.m. or whatever it's supposed to be given the day. And so we've tried to be, very respectful of what we're being told is helpful. And it's hard staying away from our families, and it's hard for them staying away from us, but we've been also really respecting that boundary.
Yeah. You are a partial child caregiver for your grandchildren too.
Yeah, normally today would be an Ellie day, so yeah.
I know that's probably got to be tough.
It's tough. It is.
And there's lots of families, our family's in the same boat with a couple grandparents that aren't available in the same way. And it's mostly us saying, please don't come because we don't want you to get sick. So.
And that's for us too. Allison had posted something on Facebook about a week ago that, the tables have turned and all the things my parents told me when I was a teenager, I'm telling them. Stay in, rest, eat well, don't get drunk, whatever, I don't know, but just take care of yourself and we'll watch each other on cameras or talk on the phone.
Yeah. Well, thank you for respecting your children.
I do. It's hard. Yeah. Not because I don't love them, but I how everyone feels invincible and sure that you're not going to be the person that might get ill, but in fact, we know we could be. So.
Well, and I even think I've also noticed just from some of the elders or senior adults who might be on the edge of that or might not see themselves as old.
Yes.
Who are kind of having to reckon with the fact that by the numbers they are in a vulnerable category that women don't usually feel vulnerable.
Exactly. And I think feeling vulnerable in that way is kind of a unique experience that I don't know that I've ever had exactly like I've had it this time around. Like, I am in that age group and I have to acknowledge that and acknowledge my vulnerability. And also that if I put myself in some kind of an awkward spot and accidentally infect someone else, family or otherwise, that would be a really hard thing to live with, and it could easily happen. So again, it's making those choices not only based on what I want or what I feel comfortable with, but what I know is for the best, of all the people around me and people I don't even know.
Yeah. Another way that I'm kind of seeing that phenomenon have an impact is that a lot of the good that's done in our communities is done by retired persons. Mm-hmm. And so the community is suffering from their absence. And then I also think that those community members who run food pantries and other kind of organizations and churches are also kind of at a loss, feeling like they're used to being useful and helpful, and and now's not the time for that. And I think that's got to be hard too.
Yeah, I think it is. It's a realignment of how we can be valuable to the larger good. And you and I were chatting just a moment before we came on, but also I think an important message is that each one of us is a valuable part of the society regardless. And I know that some of the messaging has sort of been, sacrifice yourself for the good of the younger people. And I just want people to hear me say that none of us is disposable. And I know that you believe that, and certainly our church believes that, but that somehow as people are isolated and kind of hearing that message, that it could become, very saddening and very depressing to kind of feel disenfranchised and unvalued. So I want us to continue to give that message of valuing to people, even as people struggle with having to be isolated.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting to see that like the ethical questions come up that I think in my life I've only ever like read about some of those questions in books and hypothetical conversations, and now it's getting strangely real,
Mm-hmm.
and stuff's coming out of people's mouth that you're kind of shocked to hear.
Right.
Yeah. The a scripture that comes to mind is what does it profit a man to gain the world but forfeit his soul? And I think that that's relevant to us right now. I appreciate the importance of the economy as a way that helps people feed themselves and helps cultures and societies hold together. But to pit people's lives against that is just, it's a bizarre space to be in, and a cause for prayer, I think, so that people can slow down and be careful about the decisions they're making.
And I think for us as older adults, I would say, constantly wondering what do we contribute? And I think we contribute so many things that aren't necessarily economic, although they could be, but, just the relationships that we can offer to our own families, but also the broader community. And, one of the things the Senior Adult Council talked about even last time we met was, perhaps sending cards to the confirmation students that maybe we don't even know them by face, but somehow to be the encouragers of others that are in a different generation and could experience some of our sense of faithfulness and faith and the importance of that. So I think we do have lots to offer, and maybe it's not some of the things that kind of typically get valued in the larger culture.
Yeah, I agree. And some of it's being called on in new ways right now too, because a lot of we're making a lot more phone calls, and I think generationally, elder generations are better at making phone calls and remembering people, and having that using the directory and picking up the phone just to see how somebody's doing.
Yeah.
And younger generations, that's fallen out of habit. And so as we were building a call list for the church, we've called upon a couple of our senior adults to help us to make those phone calls and check in on one another, because that's a habit that's still well formed from pre-internet days that's being called upon right now.
Very true. Yeah. And I think some of the other habits of sending cards or even sending letters, which is kind of a shocking reality, but that, those are things that people can kind of hold on to literally when they receive a card or a letter or something tangible. And I'm as guilty as the next person of texting or sending an email, but sometimes that, having that physical presence by, even a picture can be a real gift.
Yeah. And our kids are starting to do some of that too, like becoming pen pals. And our kids are going to be writing my grandparents, their great grandparents in mail for the first time. I think they ever will have done that. But I just think that'll be a unique blessing, and one that's rare, but doesn't have to be. And this is a chance to call back upon some of those ways of connecting.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
What else are you hearing from senior adults in our church, on your senior adult council, or in the community about how folks are holding up and what kind of impact this is having?
And I'm certainly not the only person gathering that information, because a lot of people are involved in checking in, which I really appreciate also. I think people are, for the most part, doing pretty well. I think they always appreciate hearing from somebody. Some of our older adults are able to access the online worship and things like that. And so they get that, daily dose or weekly dose. Some of the others, I think, are really appreciative of the phone calls or the cards or other ways that, we're trying to imagine that we can stay connected. And I know that, we've all seen on TV the people that are in isolation in nursing homes or assisted livings where the family member goes up to the window and holds up a picture or words or something and they talk on the phone. And, I think we're still kind of trying to imagine ways that if there are people that are isolated that we're not aware of, that we can perhaps figure out some other ways to stay connected. Because I think what we're doing is good, but there's always more ways to imagine doing that. And perhaps even producing some of the DVDs from worship and getting those to people will be another opportunity that even if people can't go live, they can perhaps watch a DVD on their DVD player.
Yeah. I'll mention that as I'm talking to folks, I'm noticing that part of what they're reporting to me is all the people that they've already talked to too. And so I'm glad that folks are making those phone calls and staying connected as best they can.
And I think too that, we're trying to let people know the church phone is being answered, that even though the building is closed, the church is not closed, that there's a lot happening. And so as people do have needs or concerns, and certainly the prayer list that's being emailed is important, but that people can still call in and someone will pick up that message if no one's there, and it will get conveyed to the right people. I think is also very comforting to folks who only use the phone, they're not being limited by access.
Yeah. I'll also mention that I think that I just heard today that we're setting a goal to be able to stream our service, not just on Facebook, but also on our website. So that if there are folks that do have the internet, but don't have Facebook, that they would still be able to tune in live. We're testing that out and hope to have it up and running by Palm Sunday.
Wonderful. Good.
So that's one way we're trying to make it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, good. Excellent.
You've done, as a part of your ministry, you've done a lot of learning about elder needs and also like the life of caregivers. And I wonder, that's another kind of group of people that are impacted in this time. What's on your heart about the caregiver experience in the pandemic?
I think probably the isolation is what I'm concerned about for people. So I guess the phone calling is important, although even often then the caregiver may not be able to speak their mind, but at least that sense of staying connected is important. But some of that, unless people have people that can spell them, like even a paid caregiver, a lot of times there's nobody else coming into the situation. Unless it's an adult child or someone that feels like they can at least come in and bring groceries or something. So I think that's the group of people that are probably struggling. And I'm not sure how we can best help except to stay in touch by phone and sending cards even in that situation. Some of the people I've sent a card to, I'll just include my phone number and the church phone number, because sometimes when you need somebody to talk to, you can't find what you need, right? So if it's right there on the card, then maybe, they would reach out by telephone. But again, I think that's a unique challenge, and one that by being isolated, people are probably having a lot harder time.
Yeah, I'm definitely keeping caregivers in my prayers, and wishing I knew just what I could do to give them some relief, because as I listen to caregivers talk, that's what they need, is some respite and some relief, and that's what's kind of least available right now.
Exactly.
So
yeah, exactly.
I don't know what that looks like, and if this continues to be protracted, I don't know if there are ways that we can try to give some of that respite or relief. I even thought, I don't know if it would be possible to like get people to move in together just for this, but depending on their needs, that's probably not possible. But if we had seen it coming, getting snowed in for a month, you would be careful about where you got snowed in.
Yeah, well, exactly. True. You're right. I mean, it would allow for some of that, a little bit of a break, which is honestly, even to get a good night's rest, sometimes I think is probably a huge challenge for people. And how you keep on going when you can't get rest on a good day, I don't know, but on a hard day, It's really, I'm grateful. At least perhaps people can sit outside, if nothing else, on the days when it's pleasant like this and look at the woods or the neighborhood or whoever's walking by or something like that.
Yeah. And I think it's what comes to mind is that I hope that if I get to talk to somebody who's in that kind of situation, I'll have the presence of mind to remind them that they're not alone, that part of what our faith teaches us is that God is with you in the room, in every interaction,
Right,
and
yes.
available to offer supernatural resources to folks who are run down.
Yeah, definitely.
The other caregivers that I'm thinking of a lot are medical professionals and chaplains. And I know that in addition to your ministry at church, you're also in ministry as a chaplain in the hospitals and other places of care in the community. What's that like for you now, or for other colleagues that you know who are experiencing this as chaplains?
Well, as of about 2.5 weeks ago, I haven't actually bodily been present in the hospital. And we are in the process of trying to get everyone who's part of the chaplaincy staff set up to telework, in the sense that we can access our email and access patient information, so that we can do telechaplaincy, which would be, calling into the room and speaking with someone, perhaps a family member, if the patient is unable to be on the phone. I haven't actually gotten to that point yet, but I'm almost there. I know the chief chaplain for the Novant system, Jonna Garvin, has been constantly in the hospital and all over the place. And so I think to continue to hold those folks in prayer, it's really difficult to not be able to be present to help support the medical staff that everyone knows are just overextended right now and in need of a place to offload sometimes. So there are some conversations about how to offer support through email, daily emails and things like that. And I'm not aware if that's going on. One of our church members, Cindy Hardy, is the chief chaplain at Centera in Woodbridge. And I know she is actively in the hospital on a regular basis. So again, I think it's just being prayerful for people's health and for their strength, because those who are in the caregiving role as chaplains are caring for the caregivers, and as well as patients and family members. And certainly for families who are unable to visit with their family member that's in the hospital, it's a hugely challenging time. And then when there is a death, to not be able to comfort people in the ways that we are familiar and comfortable with is also difficult. It's difficult for those offering care, but also those who are in need of that care and longing for those comforts that just aren't able to be given right now.
Yeah.
At least physically. I mean, certainly verbally, we continue to do those things.
Right. Since we mentioned her, I'll mention that we shared something on Facebook from Cindy Hardy that says that their hospital in Woodbridge, one thing that a need that they do have is Clorox wipes for around the hospital. So if you're in the Woodbridge area and able to do so safely, that's one thing that you might be able to drop off at Centera Hospital. You can look at our Facebook page to learn more about that. But I want to emphasize if you can do it safely. And I think Cindy would be happy to be contacted, folks that are interested in helping in that way. Pastor Denise, well, let me share. I got some links from a friend of mine that works for AARP, and she didn't want to do an interview because she didn't feel like she could speak for AARP and didn't want to get in trouble, which I understand. But I'm going to drop some links in this video, some advice for caregivers, ways to stay connected, and how to cope with loneliness, a few different links and things like that. What advice would you give folks who have elders in their lives that they care about? What are some things that some tools that you might give us, some things to think about so that we can stay connected and love those folks in our lives these days?
Well, I think a lot of the things we've already talked about, but I think the regular, consistent, as a family member, maybe daily phone calls or more than that, depending on where the person is and if they're secluded in a facility where no one can even visit them. And certainly sending things through the mail, I think, is a good option. Gosh, that's a hard one because, like we were saying, sometimes people can't access other things. One of the things our family has done is we have an app called Marco Polo. And so we can record a video like story time with Yaya. They call me Yaya. So I'll read a story with Clayton as my filming person, and with his commentary along the way. And then it's on the app. And so then when the family members are able to access it and need somebody to read them a story, they can watch it. And then they have read us several stories as well. So that's been fun. So I think being as creative as possible and actually like going to someone's home and staying 6 feet away if you need to, but you could sit on the porch and have a conversation, or even a porch visit where if it's chilly and the person needs to stay inside, even to visit from outside, although that means that you're geographically close enough to do that, which not everyone is, obviously. But also, I think, if people are aware of someone who needs something, to please call the church office and let us know so that we can seek to find some ways to respond. I appreciated the AARP resources, and they are good with lots of resources for caregivers in general. Also, another group is Leading Age, LEADINGAGE, and they have some resources available. So that's another website people could look at.
That's great. One of the things you've been really helpful for me with as we've worked together is helping us notice like our language around senior adults and elders. I'm wondering, so if we're in a neighborhood where we've got an older person who we think might be vulnerable in a different way than we are during this, and we want to go over there and strike up a conversation, knock on the door, talk through a window, or what have you, what are some things to keep in mind in that kind of conversation? Do you have any advice for how we? It seems simple, but we don't strike up conversations with folks that frequently. So what are some things to keep in mind?
I think honestly, just the genuine, obviously you're going out of a genuine concern to just reach out to them in kindness. And so I think to just say, I'm your neighbor, or, I haven't met you, just wanted you to know who I am. And I'd be glad to share my phone number or something if you need something ever. So not necessarily assuming that they're in need, but just like you would reach out to your neighbor next door that's your same age or whatever. I think just trying to not go with an assumption that this person is older, thus they have needs that I am anticipating, but just I think the genuine kindness that would bring you to their doorstep can also be a guide in terms of just offering kindness, offering your own vulnerability and your willingness to be available if you can be of assistance in any way. And, one of the things I saw yesterday, the day before, was a doctor talking on the internet. He said, no one over 60 should be going out to the store. And I was like, whoa, Clayton just got back from the store. So, we're all hearing all this stuff. And so people may be feeling extremely vulnerable and longing for someone that would at least offer some kindness. But yeah, I think language is a really important thing, and no one intentionally says things that are hurtful, but sometimes we say things accidentally that come across that way, and we do that to not only people that are older, but lots of reasons we say things that people are like, what? Yeah. So I think that genuine vulnerability and the loving resource of your love for God and love for your neighbor is what's drawing you there. And I think, that's kind of part of the message.
That's great. And I think a lot of that we might assume is common sense, but I think it's really helpful to hear you say it out loud, just to remind us, just to kind of be with people in general and try not to assume as much as we might be inclined to, that let them be themselves and learn who they are. one other thing that I think I'm trying to do differently is I've been saying, is there anything you need? And I might tweak that occasionally and say, we're going to the store tomorrow. What can we get for you? Because that's just a slightly different posture that because I don't think people want to admit that they're in need.
Yeah. Well, and it's very specific. It's kind of like when someone has a death and we say, well, call me if you need anything. And of course, that's not particularly helpful, even though we mean it to be helpful. But yeah, I think that's a very specific, because especially as a younger person yourself, you can go to the store pretty readily. And so, I actually was able to pick up something at the store the other day for someone that could go to the store, but was only going once a week and they couldn't find what they needed. And so I think, again, that doesn't have to be so you're an older person and I know you can't go, but I'm going. Could I get something for you and drop it on your porch or, whatever. So yeah, I think that's a really helpful, very specific way to be helpful. And I think specific always allows people to say yes or no, but it also helps people know that you really genuinely mean this, like you're not just blowing off steam, feeling better and going on your way, but you actually are concerned for their needs. And I think that's obviously who we are as the church.
Well, before we hop off, I wonder if there's anything you'd like to say to senior adults or their caregivers, particularly senior adults who might be watching now or see this video later, on behalf of yourself or the Senior Adult Council. Have you got a message for those folks that are part of that Grace family?
I think my message is always that I'm so grateful to have you in this group. And, we as a culture aspire to get older. And then sometimes it seems like once we got there, then everyone's kind of done with us. And so I think to celebrate who we are as older adults and how we acknowledge the gifts that God has given us and acknowledge ways that we may need help, but also that we have much to offer through whether it's just our kindness, and that nobody's disposable. That's my word for the day. I was thinking about that last night, and I was listening to a poem and a podcast, and that was the word. It was like, no one is disposable. We are all made in the image of God, loved by God, and unique in all the world. Pastor Janet talked this morning about the tree that brings glory to God in its uniqueness. And so I think that is our message as well, that each of us is unique and each of us has done this journey to this point in lots of amazing and sometimes challenging ways. And so we continue to care for each other and seek to be those that bring glory to God wherever we might be and however we might be on this particular day. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. If I may add, my word to you, Pastor Denise, is a word of thanks for your ministry, and to the elders that you're in ministry with, a huge word of thank you. To the Grace Church would not be in ministry today without the devotion, the generosity, the leadership, and the hard work of the elders in our church family. There's so much of who we are and what we do that depends on senior adults, and that continues to be the case to this day. And for the ways in which we've been able to be in ministry during this pandemic, I thank you, because we would not be able to do all of this if those folks have not been a part of this church now and going back for years. So
definitely.
So my main word is thank you. And then in this time when you aren't able to participate in the same way, my prayer is that you will just be in a posture of receiving, to the degree that you can't give like you usually do. Take this as a chance to just receive grace, help, connection from others, and I believe that God will be faithful. And Grace will continue to do our best to bring grace to you in whatever forms we can.
Well said. Thank you very much. And I do. We all stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us. whether still among us or as part of the communion of saints. And Grace Church has a huge, 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 wonderful history of folks among us now and those who've gone before us that have shaped this community and allowed us to be a part of the larger community in such a wonderful way. So thank you, Drew, for your leadership. We value you very much and pray for you and your family and Janet and her family. And there's a lot going on, and we appreciate all the ways that you are helping us to help each other.
Thank you. Thanks for your time today. I know everybody is really blessed to just see your face and hear your voice. So thank you. And we'll be in touch.
Okay.
Thanks.
Blessings. Bye-bye.
Bye.